we can go ahead and get started. All right, thank you all for joining for today Alumni Panel. We got our special guests, Kellie, Anna, and Jon here. And I'm gonna have them introduce themselves with their first and last name or in their gender pronouns if they would like to say so. And I'll do a little bio for each of them. So any of you all can start us off, introduce yourself.
I can start. I'm Anna, and my last name is Gyenis-Iovi, and I was a part of the program, EDCO program, 2014, 2016, those 2 years.
My name is Jon Payne. Oh, go ahead.
Thanks, Jon. I'm Kellie Raczkowski, and I'm alumni of 2018 class.
My name is Jon Payne, and I got done in 2018.
Thank y'all. Woo. All right. We have different alumni at different times. So it's really great. And so everyone, I think most of the folks in here already know who I am, but my name is Desiree McNeil. And I'm a third year EDCO student pursuing my master's in counseling guidance. So hello. I know most of you all in the Zoom. So I'll start with Kellie and introduce her and a little background about her. So Kellie is from the graduating class of 2018, as you mentioned, and has been a counselor in various capacities for about 13 years. She is currently a counselor at Hillview Middle School in the Menlo Park City School District. So it's a little bit about Kellie. And then Anna is, even before graduating in 2016, she was hired by a local high school as a school counselor. She then pivoted to the elementary school level and has been with this age group ever since. Her current position is in bilingual school, where she gets to wear many hats on a daily basis. So cool, bilingual school, love that. And then finally, we have Jon. For the last 14 years, Jon has worked in education in various positions, from campus security to starting a nonprofit organization. Woo. He graduated from EDCO in 2018 and has been a guidance counselor for the past 4 years at Calaveras Hills High School, and an alternative education program for students in Milpitas Unified School District. So that is a little bit about our guest today. And I'm going to start us off with a few questions, but I do want to open the floor before I kind of start us off. If any of our guests would like to share anything before I start kind of asking some panel questions. No? Okay. I want to ask the first question. So what brought you into this field/work setting? Any of you all can answer and start us off. So if any of you would like to kind of answer the question first and then popcorn it, or would like to share for the first question, but what brought you into this field/work setting?
So I actually never wanted to be a counselor. I mean, it certainly wasn't my first choice. I didn't envision that. I didn't have the best educational experience. School was very hard for me. And I never saw a school counselor. I didn't even know that, what their roles were, let alone if they existed at the different schools I went to. So when I entered, when I was doing my bachelor's degree, I thought for sure I was going to go into corporate America, and my undergrad is in communication studies and sociology. So I thought I always knew I loved people and I was going to work with people and with groups, but I thought I was going to be, at Google training groups on how to communicate more effectively. But I needed a job, and I found a job working at a school doing recruitment, and that's where my work began, with young people. And before that I'd worked in colleges, but I really grasped onto working with young people and helping them pursue their high school education and some college. So, I kind of thrived there, and a mentor of mine saw one of my presentations and was like, I need you in my counseling department. And I was like, I don't even know what that means, but why not? I was young and ambition and no real direction, but knew I wanted to do something that was meaningful. And I happened to be at a program that I had actually attended in high school. So that part was pretty meaningful in itself. I was connecting and giving back to a community that gave a lot to me. And I was working with low socioeconomic. I was on the east side of San Jose, and I spent 8 years at that institution. And it was pivotal in my decision to become a credentialed counselor and pursue a master's in counseling. So that's kind of what how my journey was and what got me started. So like I said, I've worked in all, or like you presented, I've worked in all facets of education, from college, a very little elementary. And I think that that's such a hard job. So, and I commend anyone that can do that. But some would say the same about me. I'm currently at a middle school, and I work with 6th, 7th, 8th graders and adolescents, and that certainly is challenging as well. But I wouldn't change it for the world. I love my job, and I love, I can't really see myself doing anything else at the moment.
Thank you, Kelly, for sharing. And Jon and Anna, you can feel free to share your answer too.
Okay, I got into counseling. I would say counseling is different than teaching. So when we look at education, the reason why I highlighted counseling versus teaching is when you look at working with a student in a classroom setting, if there's one individual student that you are working with, you have 30 other students or 20 other students that you still have to be able to work with. So you can work with a student before school, you can work with a student at lunchtime, or you can work with a student after school. But with counseling, I can work with the student throughout the day. So I can work with the student no matter what period. We can be able to sit down, have conversations, be able to get to know them even outside of school. What's going on at home, because you're at school for 6 hours, right? But you're at home for like 18 hours. So you're at home for twice as much time as you're in school. So for me as a counselor, that's why I got into counseling, because I said I want to be able to have the widest reach where I could be able to work with the kid throughout different aspects of their life and their journey. And so when I first started education, what got me into education was I was working at a warehouse graveyard shift, and the opportunity came to do campus security in the daytime, basically like in a temporary capacity. But when I got to the campus, and at that time I was around, I think 24, and the students were like 17, 18, 16, it became like a mentor type role. Students still looked up to me because I was young enough to be able to know their language, how they taught, what they were going through in life experiences, because I was working at a high school where a lot of kids came from the inner city. So from there, I knew, okay, I want to get into education in some capacity because I enjoy being able to be somewhat of a mentor to the students. And I know for me, when I was in school, I didn't really necessarily have those type of mentors at that time. And so that was just kind of how I looked at, how do I get into education? That was how I got into education. And once I got into education, what field did I want to go into? And that's why I said, okay, let me do counseling because I can have the widest reach.
Love that. Thank you, Jon.
Yeah, first of all, I wanted to say that I really appreciate meeting male counselors, because, for example, at our school here in Humboldt County, there's always just female counselors. And this year, I had an infant. She's 8 months old, and I was on maternity leave, and then a person that was an intern with us from a master's in social studies, he just stayed, and he was asked to stay to cover for me. And oh my gosh, all the kids love Mr. Nino, and he made such a difference, and how the students connect with him. And so I think we need more male counselors as well. But how did I get into counseling? Oh gosh. Well, I moved here to the United States about 12 years ago, and my first job was doing yard work and painting for people. And I painted a lawyer's house, and then he needed a receptionist for the big law firm he was a partner at. And so I went and worked there, and then I was like, this is not really what I want to do. And everybody kept saying, you should be a counselor. And I'm like, what is that? Like, I had no idea what a counselor is. but everybody saw me being good with kids and talking and accommodating and really listening, a good listener. And so then I looked into the program and gathered all the paperwork, which was a lot because I did my bachelor's in Spain and I had to translate everything and do all the documents, and I had to get married, which I did get married to my amazing husband that he's from here. And then after about 4 years, I was at the law firm. Then I applied to the program. And once I got in, it was hard to decide to do the program because I was living 6 hours away from San Jose. And so I had to move there, leaving my husband here in Humboldt. He got a teaching job just out of his credential, so he couldn't really leave. And so I was basically commuting. I lived in San Jose, really beautiful, great setup. And I was just going once a week back and forth. And I really liked the program because it was at night, basically. So, but I would leave in the morning here and then get there at 3, get ready, and then just go to school. So, but yeah, basically it was because everybody was kind of encouraging me, go be a counselor. And I'm like, okay. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, no, that you had to do a lot of sacrifices to even be in the program. And so, yeah, I understand, especially a lot of folks in the program commute like I do. So it's definitely a lot. So, no, thank you all for sharing. And another question I have for you all is, what has been the greatest challenge so far in your career, and how did you handle it, or how would you have done it differently? So what has been the greatest challenge so far in your career, and how did you handle it, and how would you have done it differently? Anyone can go first, by the way. No order.
I guess I'll go. I guess my greatest challenge, it's kind of even outside of school per se, right? So for me, it's just being able to separate my, like, where I grew up, how I grew up, where I am now, because it's completely different. Where I was 10 years ago is way different than where I am now. And so being able to separate that has been the hardest part, because for me, even when I was going to school, I still was dealing with real life situations. So I remember when I started graduate school, a friend of mine got killed. When I was finishing graduate school, a friend of mine got killed. And in my life, I say I lost probably 50, maybe 60 family and friends to like violence and stuff like that. And the rest, maybe another 50 or 60 in prison right now. And so for me, I think that's been the hardest thing, is being able to separate the past from the present and understand that, you know, what I'm trying to accomplish and how I'm trying to help youth is I've made enough mistakes for them so they don't have to make the same mistakes I've made, and try to steer them in the right direction on whatever they are, you know, trying to do with their life. That's also what took me to alternative ed and in a continuation school setting, is because a lot of those kids are coming from different backgrounds, whether they just got out of juvenile system, they're foster youth, a homeless program, whatever obstacles they're facing, or if they just come in with low credits. I feel like I can be able to help them get them back on the right path. So my challenge is also, I guess, a bonus and a benefit for me too, because what I've experienced helped me, you know, be able to be the counselor I can be. But it definitely is a challenge for me, just being able to separate the two.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you for sharing, Jon. Appreciate it.
I think, the counseling profession in general just is innate a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Everything from the populations and demographics we're working with to various environments, it depends on the schools you're in, the districts, the resources. I've worked I work in a pretty affluent district now in Menlo Park. But where my career started was in East San Jose, with a very low socioeconomic status group and very, very little to no resources. And certainly that had a very different set of challenges. So, one of the most challenging parts of my career was learning how to adapt to my school environment and be able to show up and service the kids and support the kids that I was working with currently, right? But, you know, I also found that just being a counselor in, you know, watching how over my years in counseling, the profession has evolved, and the training that I've received being far ahead of a lot of what the districts are actually doing in the school sites. You know, in a lot of districts, they have school counselors doing, you know, what guidance counselors used to do. And we know through our training, right, that that's not what we are. And if we want to align ourselves with the ASCA model, which is what, you know, EDCO represents and what most counseling education programs do right now, my biggest challenge is always trying to get my program to align. And to get my, you know, administrators and district offices to see the value in doing that.
That's a great point. Yeah. For me, probably one of the biggest challenges is really knowing where the boundary is. Like, that's still my work being a counselor, even though I put all my heart to helping people, like going out of my way to, like, since I have 2 kids now, I put clothes away, and then I think about our Hispanic families that a mother was giving birth just 2 weeks after I gave birth, and like I was like, well, they might not have this, they might not have diapers, they might not have a lot of things because they just immigrated here. And so I did give them something, but where do you stop? Like, where do you stop to take care of yourself and not worry all the time? Like, even on maternity leave, I was like, okay, when I go to sleep, I'm like, oh, I wonder how so-and-so is doing. Oh, I wonder what's happening in their household. I wonder if they're okay. And so I think that's one of the biggest challenges for me. And now that I have kids, a very big challenge is not to see if the kids at my school are having difficulties or have a behavioral issue or are struggling with something going on, not trying to take it on me and think, oh my God, are my kids going to be okay? Are my kids going to do this? Are they going to behave like this? So just like putting that out of my mind, that's my biggest challenge lately. But I'm dealing as good as I can with it. And it's nice to help, but we have to know that if we are not able to help ourselves, we're not going to be able to help others. So
yes, very true. And I think that's something I always have to consider, even though I'm a grad student. But yeah, sweet reminder. Thank you all for sharing that your answers with us. And I'm going to open the floor to our attendees. If you all would like to ask a question, feel free to unmute yourself or put it in the chat. Maria. Okay, go ahead, Maria.
I have a question. So within your role, how do you use data, and what are some best practices with using data within your role?
That's a really great question. I think it kind of ties into what our responsibilities are. And I'll reference again the ASCA model, right? That we need to use data to influence our programming and evolve our programs. So this department uses data in a variety of ways. We run everything from attendance reports to let's see what else. Obviously, assessment data we use, surveys, information systems, data. before pre-COVID, because everything is really shifted because of COVID, right? We're finding ourselves doing a lot more things, but this year we've had to do a lot of mental health work with our kids, which I think is probably, an obvious thing for most counselors now, that we were going to be inundated with kids that needed more emotional support than ever. So serving our district's good in that it puts out a district-wide survey, and we can pull data from that. And what that does is that lets us tailor our programming. So we will develop groups specific to where the greatest need is, and do, SEL lessons where the greatest need is presented, but that changes over time. And so every year that data needs to be reassessed so that we're not running the same groups, but we're meeting the needs of the students where they're at currently. So I think best practice is use data in your day-to-day, do an annual review of the work that you've done. So keep data on what you're doing. If you're having a small group, get your students' feedback on their participation, get teachers' feedback, try to figure out a way to monitor the change level. So, if your goal is to improve organizational or executive functioning skills, get input on how that's, how has that happened? Has your group been effective? Those kinds of things. And at the end of the year, do an annual review. I can't stress enough. It's really important to look back at what you did and see where you want to focus for the following year.
Thank you.
Great question. Great question. John and Anna, would you like to add to that?
I absolutely agree with what Kellie said. And also, I think data is also important for teachers. Like, definitely throughout the pandemic and when we started to go back, like last year, teachers were overworked. Like, they put so much time and so much work in dealing with lots of things, not just teaching, let alone teaching. So collecting data to see how your teachers are doing, I think that's very, very important, and try to look at that data and provide the mental health services for them as well. It's very important. So.
Yeah, I agree.
At the continuation school, attendance is going to be very vital. See who's in school, what are their patterns. For example, you might have students that miss every Friday. What's going on, why they're not coming on Fridays. So I think for me, that's always great to be able to grab that data. But outside of just like Aries, the system that we use, and gathering information through queries and stuff like that, Google is great. Where you do Google Forms, if it's putting it on a spreadsheet or it puts it in a pie chart. So when you're gathering information, you send it out to a student, and they give their answers, it'll give you percentages. So you can kind of go off of that as far as students that might be interested in career tech, students that might be interested in college. You can also run how many people have a job currently, who does not. So you can know if you want to bring employers on campus to try to generate jobs for students. So I think that's great, as well as using those search engines to be able to have that information that you can compare year to year as well. So for me personally, I think that's great if you want to do your platform, like I said, Aries, but also utilize Google and stuff like that, because that's easy and accessible to send out to your students.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, agree. Perfect. Thank you. And do we have any more questions from the attendees? No, I have a question. Okay. So how did your Lurie College experience contribute to your skills as a professional? Were there any activities that were meaningful to you? And I can also put that question in the chat.
I think the college experience at San Jose State was great in that, for example, when I mentioned a buddy of mine got killed my first day, I remember I met Miss Capizzi. She kind of talked to me because I came late. It was like an orientation and I was late. So I told her, why I was late. And we talked about it. And so for me, growing up in Oakland Unified School System, I never really had teachers that cared. I can remember one teacher that truly cared throughout my whole time about what was going on in your life, just about school, anything like that. So I think for San Jose State, what helped me was when you saw a professor that cared and really wanted to understand what was going on in your life, how they can help you. for me, I think that was the greatest gift or greatest thing that anybody can do as it relates to my college journey, because I didn't have professors that truly cared. Like I said, I didn't have teachers when I went to school in Oakland that really cared per se. So to have somebody that genuinely cared and wanted to really see you be successful and help you throughout that process, for me, that was the greatest thing that I could take away. Different than just learning the material, but just having somebody that really had a genuine care for what you want to do and your well-being.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to think. There's two things that during the program I remember that we had a class that this coach came and she took us to Los Gatos, one of the educational centers there, the whole class, and she did like coaching, teaching us how to work in teams and decode different games, and we used a rope, and then we had to figure out how to work together. Like really, if somebody messed up, then the whole team would just lose points. And it was really fun. That day was so much fun and so interactive, and we learned so much. As great minds make wonders. I don't know, you guys have like a proverb that says when you put together great minds, you can make a wonderful job. And
yeah,
so
I know
was
what you're
great.
saying. It's one of those.
Yeah, what's
Yeah.
the saying? I can't remember
I
the
think
saying.
great minds think alike.
Yes, there you
Yeah.
go. Thank you. Yes. I know I have these glitches in English sometimes. It's like heels overhead. I might have said it. That's not the way you say it, but it's the other way, whatever. And so I remember that day. And then we also had one semester when other people would come from different schools and universities and programs and would share their experience, how they became a counselor, and they were talking about their jobs, and that was very impactful. Like one person was working with a lot of juvenile kids and from gangs, and that was very a lot of trauma. And so I remember that very clearly. And of course, being a working with Dr. Mena was really wonderful. Yeah, she's pretty amazing. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree. The faculty was really great. Like my counterparts on the panel said, like I looked forward to coming to class because I look forward to interacting with Dr. Capizzi and her the counseling practicums that we did, where we had to get in pairs and like practice counseling on each other, and talking about theory and practicing practicing those methods on each other. But I learned a lot, and I feel like what my experience with that program did was just kind of put a name to all of the skills I had already been using but didn't know I was using. I started to understand cognitive behavioral therapy and Gestalt, and like some of these tactics and techniques that I had been using, probably that were used on me that I just didn't know. But I started to conceptualize that. And I learned how to put it into practice and put a plan together to support my students or my clients. And that's another thing, is like, I never knew that I wanted to do therapeutic work. Like that was not a thing for me. It wasn't even a consideration. And then the bridging of the LPC program at the time, I'm not sure it's still that way. I thought I heard that it changed after we left, after our class, but we were able to do both at once. And when that was presented to me, I was like, oh, why not? It's another, I don't know, 30 units or whatever it was. And but then I learned even more therapeutic practice, and I was very interested in, and my first year out of my credential, I became the ERMS counselor, which I was providing actual therapeutic support to students with IEPs. And that was an intense, throw you into the fire type experience. And I learned a lot. And I also learned about myself, and I learned that actually therapy isn't what I want to be doing full time and long term. So, but the school provided me with a space to learn those things about myself, and I grew, and I made amazing relationships with my peers, and some who I still talk to. So I think that was one of the greatest gifts of the college. But yeah, I too, we had some really good presenters come out from the community, and I learned more resources that I could provide to my students that I was working with at the time. So yeah, it was great. It's a really great program.
Yeah, I agree with all that you all mentioned. It really is a great program. And Dr. Capizzi, I have to say everyone's really, really supportive and great. And Professor Scheckman, he's always bringing people from the community, different special guests. So that's have always been, like you mentioned, Kelly, very helpful, especially when you're helping students, like just almost got to keep a list. But yeah, thank you all for sharing. And then we have a question in the chat. And the question is, if you can go back to your first year as a counselor, what is some advice you would give to yourself? This is a great question.
This is a great question.
Yes. It's okay. What you think?
Well, it's kind of like talking to your younger self, right? Especially, I think, you know, I have so many years in counseling in a different capacity, but I think if I go back to my first year, I would let myself know what I was in for. You know, that this is a job where and when any job where you're in a helping profession where you take on a lot. And, you know, Anna talked about that earlier, about taking on, absorbing the challenges that our students are facing. And that has a real impact on you. So the first, you know, what I would tell myself is get into therapy, you know, find ways to get yourself some care, you know, whatever self-care looks like, do it, because it's vital. I mean, my early years, long hours in the office, you know, taking on a lot of emotional turmoil that my students were enduring, and not having any real skills on how to deal with that made it really a difficult job. And I got burnt out really fast. And so, yeah, I think, you know, be aware of what you're taking on, and make sure that you take care of yourself first.
Yeah, it's a good point. While I was still in the program, I became an ARC, I think it's called, for the housing department at San Jose State. Oh my God. I was very surprised by the lack of skills students have, like burning popcorn and having to evacuate the whole building at 2 a.m. or not knowing how to make macaroni and cheese, and not knowing how to wash laundry or do laundry. And so again, I would probably give myself the advice of not taking anything personal, and not thinking that, oh, okay, you're from another country, your parents let you be independent and figure out life and didn't give you everything. Not everybody's like that. Just like not make assumptions. I used to do that a lot. So I think that's one of the advices probably that I would give myself, and really take care of myself, because I was working way too much, and the school and working night shifts, and yeah, it got to be too much. Yeah.
I guess it's on me, right? So
Yeah.
first year, I was just struggling for the past couple minutes trying to really think, how do I answer this? Because I think I prepared myself pretty good my first year, because I know the summer before I started, I went to the ASCA had a conference, my annual conference. I went to that conference, so they were able to prepare you for, you know, different aspects, add things to your tool belt. Also, I did community college counseling as an adjunct, so I was able to understand college, what, you know, was going on at the college level. So how can I advise students when they get to that level? So first year, I think I really went in prepared. I think my greatest advice that I would give myself as far as the first year would be patient as it relates to jobs. And the reason why I say that is because my first year out of school, I kind of jumped on whatever job was available because I had a family. And in hindsight, had I waited, there was more offers that came later on. So I think that would be the greatest advice I would give myself, is just kind of be patient as it relates to really vetting the different districts and understanding not just your role as a counselor, but what is the benefit package look like? At the school that you're at, what is the environment, the background of the school, really just understanding what you're signing up for. I think that's the greatest gift, because if you think about in a district, when you get into the district, your clock starts as far as tenure and what you're doing in that district. If you shift to a new district, now you're starting, your Cal Stirs is still in place, but your clock with that district, you'll get the years that you had before, but as far as tenure and as far as being able to get tenured in that district, it will start over. So I think that will be my biggest advice, is just being able to really sit down and understand each district as you apply, and really pick the district that's really going to fit you. Would be my greatest advice for myself if I look back at, because I was in a different district than I am now, and so that's why I would say that, because I took the first job, but I had to commute, and the commute was an issue for me, because if I'm in traffic for an hour and a half going and I'm in traffic for an hour and a half coming, I can't be the best father. I can't be the best counselor, because I got dead time on the freeway that I can't do anything with. So that's what I mean when I say, vet the district and understand the full picture of everything.
John, I could not agree with you more. I think it's so important for you to consider the culture of the school that you're at and really do the research to figure out if that's a place that aligns with your values around this, school counseling and the type of work that you want to do. I think that's something else I wish I would have known earlier on when I became a credentialed counselor for public schools, is that, districts are all different and they see counseling and functions differently. I didn't know that many of the school counselors are tied into the teachers' unions. And so they're contracted on the teacher's salary. And it's based on your credentialed years is where you place on that salary scale. So, these are kind of like facts that I wish I would have known going in and to understand, because like John mentioned, like, when you're looking at salary and what your needs are, and, we all, let's face it, it's a profession that's not going to pay us millions of dollars a year. Like, we're just not, that's not going to happen for us. Right. And so we have to be mindful about that. And so, so knowing how counseling is placed, how your role is placed. Also, I think too, like knowing how many counselors, so what's your student ratio, right? I've seen jobs where, I've applied for jobs where I was going to be the only counselor for 1,000 students. You can just imagine what type of work I'd really be doing. It'd be mostly crisis and triaging. Although in that district, I didn't do 504s, so I probably have a little more time with the kids. In this district, I got a pretty small caseload comparatively. I'm just at right around 300 students, which is great. But I manage all the 504s for that case. So like I said, I really think, John brought up a great point. I really think knowing the district, knowing what the expectations for you as a counselor and what that role is super vital to making a good decision on where you want to place.
Also, real quick, I wanted to circle back on what I just said as well. Understanding too, that if you had a job before you got into counseling, how Social Security works versus your Cal Stirs. Because if you work a job for 5 to 10 years and you place Social Security, you won't receive Social Security if your amount that you make in Cal Stirs outweighs the amount you made in Social Security. So just keep in mind, for me, having done education before I got into having a credential, you only get the years of service as it relates to the credential when you're in K-12. So at community college, they'll give you years of experience level. For example, I was at UC Santa Cruz for a little bit of time before I got into to being at the community college, you're still getting your years. But when you get into K-12, it's only the years that the credential has been in place. So just understand that as well as it relates to the salary scale. That was something I didn't really realize until I got in. It's like, okay, I did 10 plus years before I got into this role, but it's all for naught as it relates to the salary schedule. So just understanding that as well. I think for me, my first year, if I thought about that and understood that more, it wouldn't have been like a shock.
Yeah, no, great advice. Thank you all. That was really good. I think as like some of us are going to be graduating soon, so this is really great advice as we kind of transfer over to the professional life. So yeah, thank you so much. And I do have one more, my second to last question for you all, and that is, have you had any mentors to support you in your career? And how can recent graduates find mentors in the field?
If I can go first,
yes,
I have to
go
pick
ahead.
up our little princess over
oh,
here.
yes. Hi.
The mini me. Yes, I did have great mentors. Well, throughout the school, Dr. Mena has been always a really great mentor. And I was able to email her even afterwards and always stay in contact. And she has always been very helpful for me. And at my school, having a behavioralist and a speech therapist that are really next door to me, they've been very, very supportive and always making sure we touch base on the kids we work on and how we are doing as, you know, human beings and working with kids. And that's been very helpful. So yeah, thank you. I'm sorry that I had to go because my mom is here helping out from Romania, but she can only do so much.
Right.
You know, when she's like crying so much, then mommy has to come nurse. So
yes, of course. No problem. Thank you. Thank you for joining, and thank you for sharing and being transparent and sharing your experience. We appreciate you. Thank you so much. Bye. Kelly and John, you can answer. I put the question in the chat too.
So as it relates to a mentor, I think that's very important, you know, whether you're teaching, you're counseling, anything that you're doing, being able to have somebody that has done this before, that you can really be able to let them know what you're going through, and they're going to give you sound and wise advice, not steer you in the wrong direction. So for me, I mentioned before, not really having teachers that truly care to show care for me as a student. I did have a vice principal that I'm still in great communication with. He calls me, you know, a couple times a month, see how I'm doing, recommendation letters. He's always been able to do that throughout the years. And I think for him, that kind of bodes to why he got into education as well, to be able to see a former student that was in trouble a lot, suspended a lot, and be able to be where I am now. It's funny when me and him have conversations because we can go back to that point in time when we're talking about Oakland in the 90s, dealing with everything that I used to have to go through to where I am now is great. And so he has done various roles. He was a teacher, a counselor, a principal, vice principal, different aspects in education. So I can be able to have a conversation with him and he can give me sound advice as it relates to what is the best decision to make in that particular role. And that I can't express enough how important that is, to have somebody that you can be able to have a conversation with that necessarily work in your district. It doesn't necessarily work with you as a colleague, that can be able to give you proper advice on how to be able to be the best counselor you can be at that point in time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with John. I've had various mentors throughout my years. I had a mentor in my first years of college that I still talk to as well. That's been very influential, and also went through the EDCO program, but it was like 85 or 86, something like that. So she has a master's from San Jose State too in the program. And again, at the beginning, I didn't think that would be me, right? But it turns out here I am. And and she's somebody that I rely on heavily as well. But then, I think that it's important that you find mentors at all levels. So if our goal is to grow, especially in our careers, we want to keep seeking advice and seeking support. So internships, I think, are the best place to find mentors for new counselors. I remember my first internship at a middle school was out in Cupertino, and one of the head counselors, she had been there for like 12 years already. So she knew her program really, really well. And, she was just instrumental in me making the decision to pursue middle school. I thought for sure I'd be a high school counselor, I mean, it's a completely different job. So, but I thought for sure that's where I'd be at. Academic planning. Let's get ready for college. Let's get ready for career. And turns out that I really loved working with adolescents and working through and doing social emotional learning and helping them through those years of development. But it was from her work. She just let me dabble into everything. She didn't hide anything from me. I've been in other internships where I was like, here, do this very specific task, and this will be your entire internship, and so I think that finding a mentor at each level and each mentor or internship will be important. I might also add that this would be really important for future jobs, because I had 2 job offers from that district because of her recommendation and because of the partnerships and relationships that I had created in those schools. So, the best thing you can do is, one, find somebody, like Jon said, to give you good advice and help walk you through the program and what your expectations as a counselor will be, but also create really positive relationships with other people, faculty, your administrators, because that could lead to long-term career success as well.
Great. And I put
Also,
the chat. Yeah, go ahead, Jon.
I was just gonna say, to that point, internships are great as well, because I actually, when I was in the program, Dr. Roberts asked that I intern over at the middle school in Milpitas. I was not familiar with Milpitas outside of the Great Mall, never had really any dealings in Milpitas, but being able to intern there was a middle school, and I was able to see what the middle school, or how the middle school is different than high school or different levels, because I had worked in elementary school with the nonprofit that I had, and then being able to have the middle school, and I was already familiar with the high school aspect. And when I transitioned out of San Jose State, my first job was actually a middle school counselor job. I enjoyed being able to work with the students, and I enjoyed being able to see the transition from elementary school to middle school, because I think that's the greatest transition, even bigger than middle school to high school, because you go from having majority one teacher throughout your whole day in elementary school. Now, when you get into middle school, you're having 5 or 6 different teachers, 5 or 6 different personalities. And you also have passing period where now this is your first freedom, right? You can come to class on time or you can come to class late. And so being able to work with students, especially 6th grade, when they transition into middle school, that was a great opportunity for me. I think the greatest frustration, though, and one thing when like I said, talk to the mentor about, is at middle school, grades don't essentially matter as it relates to transitioning to high school, because social promotion. That was the greatest frustration I had, because it's like a kid can have straight F's, right? And that kid's still gonna go to 9th grade no matter what. At this point in time now, in most districts, they will move along. Where high school, really, when the student gets to my school, we're preaching everything matters, right? Your grades matter, D's, F's matter, because everything, especially when you're behind in credits, you have to get caught up, especially the alternative ed. So I think that's when I talked to the mentor about that aspect of it. I was like, okay, I can transition to high school. But like I said, going back to the internship, I'm in Milpitas Unified now, and the whole relationship started as the intern. So that's where I'm just kind of walking through that process. So to the point that Kellie made, it's very important too, when you're doing your internship, even if there's no job specifically available at that point in time, you always have to put your best foot forward, because you never know when it can circle back and you might go to that district at a future date. So you always want to be able to come punctual, on time, be able to come prepared, because they'll remember when you come and do great work as an intern, they'll always remember that. So when it was time for me to go into the position I am now, they went back to that particular school and asked them what type of individual I was. If I did not come in on time and work hard, now you already closed the door on the opportunity that you could have had.
Absolutely.
Yep, definitely. And I can attest to that, literally speaking, networking, because some, and then showing up and just doing what you're supposed to, it definitely, people notice it. Supervisors notice it even when you don't think they do. So yeah, I think that's great advice, y'all. Well, I have a fun little quick question for y'all to end it on a good note. And just like, it's already a good note, but I guess on a funner note. So what is one thing that you do outside of your job, like a hobby or a way that you kind of de-stress and just not all canceling and helping students, something that you do outside of work that you would like to share that you do, like a fun activity or hobby?
I guess I can go since I'm using my garage. I I have a lot of bikes, like one is there,
Wow.
one over there. I love to do road biking most of the time. I used to do mountain biking because we live right next to the forest here in Arcata. If you never visited Humboldt County, I really recommend. It's 5.5 hours away from San Jose, up north. But I love to bike and to hike outside and be at the beach, at the ocean. And it's really great living up here because it only takes me 7.5 minutes to get to my school to work and about 10 minutes to go to the beach, and I can walk to the forest. So that's one of my hobbies, to be outside.
Wow, that's great. That's a great de-stressor too, when you just want to just escape. So that's great. Thanks for sharing.
I would love to say I have all these great things, but I have 2 small children, and we're heavy into dance and baseball right now. So most of my free time is occupied by their extracurricular activities, which I don't mind because it's kind of fun. This is the part of raising kids that I was looking forward to the most. Babies are awesome, but when you start raising them and they do things like this, it's pretty cool to see. But when I'm not doing those kinds of things, I too got a mountain bike recently as a birthday present. So I've been trying to get on it. We'll see how that works out. My husband's an avid mountain biker. But I like to exercise. I like to move. I just like to go for a walk, or, I'm crazy and I go to the gym at 5 a.m. because that's the only time in my day that I can get anything done, and I can actually dedicate some time to myself, which, I know I mentioned earlier about self-care. It's so important. So, but I've come to enjoy it. It's a little bit of freedom, and it's a little bit of time to just be with myself and focus on myself. And so it's really great. So that's my free time in a nutshell.
Love that. Jon, what about you?
So my daughter plays basketball. She plays AAU, so that's travel basketball.
Yeah,
that takes up a lot of my time.
A lot.
Her. So that's the main thing right now. But outside of working with her, stocks, so just reading stock charts, just doing analysis. It goes into counseling, right? What we mentioned before. If you get into education, it's not necessarily for the money. So for me, being able to do something else that can supplement is what I've really tried to work on, being able to add other sources of income. So stock is really my number one thing that I work on right now, just being able to invest. You can look at different things, mutual funds, you can look at index funds, ETFs. So that's what I really spend my time when I have free time, is reading books as it relates to the stock market.
Nice. Yeah.
Very cool.
Amazing. You might, I need to take a class on how people even all that stock stuff. I was I can't,
It's
I
a
don't
lot.
know anything, but maybe
You have a
after
lot
I
of time.
graduate.
You have a lot of time to do that.
Yes. you do.
Yeah, right now, not so much.
Yeah.
I'm in 221, so I'm just trying to write my thesis paper.
Oh.
So, but
Is that the
yeah, I was like,
assessment class?
that is 221 is like we're writing majority of like our thesis paper.
Your thesis
Oh,
work.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so I told myself, yeah, I'll get into all my stuff I want to learn, extra stuff I want to do after.
Uh,
So, well, first of all, I just want to say thank you all again for doing this alumni panel and sharing just really great and sound advice. You know, a lot of folks couldn't make it due to class and different things like this. So recording this and then people can watch it on their own time. It's going to be very beneficial. And you all gave great advice. As some of us are about to graduate this semester, our next semester. So and hopefully we'll be in where you all at in a few years or another year, who knows? But so thank you all. And also you guys want to share your LinkedIn in the chat. You know, we can follow you on LinkedIn and I can maybe share that on our social media too. So then for students can like, you know, follow you and get in contact if they have any questions.
You also can share my email address with anyone that is interested or looking for a job. We don't have enough doctors, not enough counselors up here. So, you know, that's one thing they would have to move up here, which is not that
Yes.
bad. I moved here from Romania, so, you know,
So,
that's even
yeah.
further. So,
Yeah.
yeah, just feel free to give my email address to anybody that, you know, has any
Yeah.
questions or anything.
Perfect. And if you don't know your, like, if you can always email me or Janine your LinkedIn whenever you get a chance. No need to do it right now, but yeah. So thank you all again. I'm going to stop recording and